The call came at 2 a.m. local time, the phone's harsh ring cutting through the humid African night. I fumbled for it in the darkness of my temporary quarters, still half asleep. Emma, you need to hear this. My sister Rachel's voice dripped with smug satisfaction. I solved our little property dispute. I sold the house. I sat up slowly, suddenly wide awake. You did what? Oh, don't act so surprised, she said with a laugh. That house has been sitting empty for months while you're off playing humanitarian. Someone needed to do something about it. My name is Emma Chin, and I'm a trauma surgeon volunteering with Doctors Without Borders in Uganda. The house Rachel was talking about wasn't just any property, it was our family home, left to us jointly by our parents. The same house she'd been trying to force me to sell for the past year. Rachel, I said carefully, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. You can't sell the house without my signature. I'm co-owner. Her laugh echoed through the phone. Actually, I can. Remember that power of attorney you signed before you left? The one for emergencies? Well, I used it. The sale closed yesterday. $800,000 cash. My heart stopped. The power of attorney. I'd signed it thinking Rachel might need to handle medical decisions for me while I was abroad. I never imagined she'd use it to sell our childhood home. The house is worth at least $3 million, I said, my mind racing. Why would you sell it for a quarter of its value? The market's terrible right now, she replied dismissively. Besides, I needed quick cash. David's investment opportunity won't wait forever. David. Of course, my sister's husband of 2 years, the financial genius who had already burned through their savings with his get-rich-quick schemes. You know what? Rachel continued, her voice sharp. You don't get to complain. You abandoned everything to play doctor in Africa. Someone had to deal with reality back home. I closed my eyes, thinking about what was hidden inside that house. Something Rachel knew nothing about, something that would make her quick cash sale look like the disaster it truly was. Who bought it? I asked, trying to sound defeated. Some development company. They're demolishing it next week to build condos. She paused, probably waiting for me to break down or beg. When I didn't, she added, I'll have your share of the money transferred to your account. Minus my finder's fee, of course. Of course. Rachel had always been like this, entitled, selfish, convinced that everything should go her way. Our parents' death 2 years ago had only made it worse. When's the demolition scheduled? I asked, already pulling up flight options on my laptop. Next Thursday. Why? Planning to fly home and stop it? She laughed again. Don't bother. The sale's done, Emma. You can't change it. I thought about the hidden room behind the library wall, the one our father had built decades ago, about the safe embedded in its concrete floor and what lay inside it. We'll see about that, I said quietly and hung up. The next few hours were a blur of activity. I arranged emergency leave from the hospital, booked the first available flight to Boston, and made some crucial phone calls. By sunrise, I was on my way to Entebbe International Airport. During the long flight home, I thought about the last conversation I'd had with our father, just days before the car accident that killed both our parents. The safe holds everything, he'd said, pressing the key into my hand. Documents, accounts, everything I've built. Rachel can never know. She's not ready for that responsibility. Promise me you'll protect it. I promised, not fully understanding what I was agreeing to. It wasn't until after their death that I finally opened the safe and discovered the truth about our family's legacy. The papers inside revealed that our father, the quiet librarian everyone knew, had been living a double life. He'd spent decades building a real estate empire under various aliases, accumulating properties and investments worth over $50 million. All of it hidden, protected, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. I kept the secret, just as he'd asked. Even when Rachel started pressuring me to sell the house, I'd held firm. The safe and its contents had to be protected. Now, as my plane descended into Boston Logan International Airport, I pulled up the text I'd received from my father's old lawyer, Benjamin Wong. Documents ready. Meeting set for tomorrow. She won't know what hit her. Rachel thought she'd won. She thought she'd finally beaten her older sister, the one who'd always played by the rules. But she had no idea what was coming. As I collected my luggage, another text came through, this one from Rachel. Demolition team's doing a walkthrough tomorrow. Last chance to say goodbye to the old place. I smiled despite my exhaustion. Perfect timing. The taxi ride to my old apartment was surreal. Boston had changed in the months I'd been gone. Or maybe I had. The familiar streets felt different somehow, charged with purpose. I unlocked my apartment door, dropping my bags in the entryway. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, covered in a thin layer of dust. I went straight to my office, to the locked drawer where I kept my most important documents. The key to the safe was there, along with copies of everything inside it. Proof of our father's empire, documentation of every property, every account, every investment. Rachel thought she was selling a $3 million house. She had no idea she was sitting on the headquarters of a real estate empire worth 50 times that amount. My phone buzzed again. Benjamin Wong. Everything in place for tomorrow. Are you sure you want to do this? It will destroy your relationship with her completely. I thought about Rachel's laugh when she told me about selling the house. About all the times she'd taken advantage, manipulated, and schemed her way through life. About how she used my trust against me, abusing the power of attorney I'd given her. Unsure, I texted back. Some relationships need to be destroyed. Tomorrow would change everything. Rachel thought she was clever, selling the house quickly and quietly, but she was about to learn that our father had taught me far more than she'd ever known. I sat down at my desk and began reviewing the documents I'd need for tomorrow's meeting. Every detail had to be perfect, because when the dust settled, Rachel would finally understand what it meant to truly lose everything. And I would be there to watch it happen. The morning dawned crisp and clear as I pulled up to our family home for the last time. 2 black SUVs were already parked in the driveway, one belonging to the demolition company, the other to Rachel and David. I checked my watch, 9:15 a.m. Right on schedule. Rachel was standing on the front porch with David, watching as men in hard hats conducted their preliminary inspection. She froze when she saw me step out of my car. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her designer heels clicking against the wooden boards as she marched toward me. "I thought you were in Africa." "Surprise," I said calmly, adjusting my blazer. "I caught an early flight." David hung back, shifting uncomfortably. He'd always been wary of me, perhaps sensing that I saw through his smooth-talking facade. "You didn't need to come," Rachel snapped. "Everything's handled. The sale is final." "About that," I replied, pulling out my phone as a third vehicle turned into our driveway. "We need to talk." Benjamin Wong stepped out of his Mercedes, briefcase in hand. Rachel's eyes narrowed at the sight of our father's old lawyer. "What's he doing here?" "Mr. Wong," I called out, ignoring her question. Perfect timing. The demolition team's foreman approached, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, addressing Rachel. "We're ready to begin the internal inspection." "Actually," I interrupted, "you'll want to wait on that. There are some ownership issues we need to address first." Rachel laughed, but I caught the nervous edge in it. "There are no issues. I had power of attorney. The sale is legitimate." The power of attorney, Benjamin said, opening his briefcase, was for medical emergencies only. It did not grant you authority to sell jointly owned property. "What?" Rachel's face flushed. "That's not true. I had it reviewed by David's cousin who just passed the bar. I finished for her. Yes, I'm sure he did a thorough job." The foreman looked between us, clearly sensing trouble. "Should we come back another time?" "No," Rachel said quickly. "Proceed with the inspection. My sister is just being difficult." "Actually," Benjamin interjected, pulling out a document, "I have a court order preventing any demolition or alteration of this property pending investigation of fraudulent sale." Rachel's confidence finally cracked. Fraudulent? I had every right to sell a $3 million property for $800,000 without consulting your co-owner. I asked quietly, to use a medical power of attorney for a real estate transaction, to facilitate what appears to be deliberate property value manipulation? David stepped forward, his salesman smile in place. "Look, Henma, if you're unhappy with the price, maybe we can." "This isn't about the price," I cut him off. "This is about what's inside the house." Rachel rolled her eyes, but I caught the flicker of uncertainty in her expression. "Inside, it's empty. We cleared everything out months ago." I turned to Benjamin. "Should we show them?" He nodded, pulling out another document. "Ms. Chen, would you like to do the honors?" I led the group into the house, through the familiar hallways to the library. Rachel's heels echoed on the hardwood floors, her nervous energy palpable. "What is this about, Emma?" she demanded. "If you're trying to stop the sale." "It's too late for that," I said, stopping in front of the bookshelf that had always been our father's favorite. "The sale was void the moment you signed the papers. But that's not why I'm here." I reached for the hidden latch behind Shakespeare's complete works, the one our father had shown me years ago. With a soft click, the entire bookshelf swung forward, revealing the hidden room behind it. Rachel gasped. David swore under his breath. The demolition foreman took an involuntary step back. "What? What is this?" Rachel whispered. "This," I said, stepping into the concrete room, "is our father's real legacy. The one he didn't trust you to know about." I knelt down and opened the safe embedded in the floor, the key turning smoothly in the lock. Inside lay decades of our father's careful planning, property deeds, account statements, corporate documents. Benjamin began laying out papers on the table. "Your father," he explained, "was more than just a librarian. He spent 30 years building one of the largest private real estate portfolios in Massachusetts, all under various aliases, all perfectly legal, all carefully hidden." Rachel stared at the documents, her face pale. "How much?" "The current market value," Benjamin said, "is approximately $50 million. David's eyes went wide. Rachel grabbed the edge of the table for support. "And you," I said to my sister, "just tried to sell the corporate headquarters of this empire for $800,000 to a shell company that, I suspect, is owned by David or one of his associates." David took a step backward, but Benjamin's assistant was already blocking the doorway. "The FBI is very interested in this transaction," I continued, "particularly given David's history of failed investment schemes and the suspicious timing of the sale." Rachel's legs gave out, and she sank into our father's old leather chair. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew all this time." "Dad told me everything before he died," I confirmed. "He made me promise to protect it until the right time." "And you didn't tell me?" Her voice cracked. "Your own sister." I looked at her, really looked at her. The designer clothes, the perfect makeup, the entitled attitude that had defined her entire life. "Dad knew you weren't ready," I said softly. "And he was right. The first chance you got, you tried to sell his life's work for pennies on the dollar." Benjamin cleared his throat. "The FBI agents are waiting outside. They have some questions about the attempted sale and the potential fraud involved." Rachel's head snapped up. "Fraud?" "But I had power of attorney." "A medical power of attorney," I corrected her. "Using it for real estate transactions is fraud. Selling property significantly below market value to a connected party is fraud. And doing it all without proper authority is definitely fraud." 6 months later, I sat in Benjamin Wong's office, signing the final documents that would restructure our father's empire. Rachel and David were both facing federal fraud charges, their assets frozen pending investigation. "Everything's in order," Benjamin said, sliding the papers into his briefcase. "The foundation is established, and the scholarship fund will launch next month." I nodded, thinking about how our father would have approved. The bulk of his fortune would now fund educational opportunities for underprivileged students, turning his secret empire into a force for good. "Have you heard from Rachel?" he asked carefully. "Not since the indictment," I replied. "She tried calling a few times in the beginning, alternating between threats and tearful pleas for help. But after I testified about her fraudulent use of the power of attorney, she finally understood that there was no going back. The house still stood, though I'd had it completely renovated. The hidden room was now a secure office, its existence properly documented. The demolition company had been revealed as a front for David's latest scheme. He planned to flip the property for its true value once the fraudulent sale went through. My phone buzzed. A message from the hospital in Uganda. "When are you coming back? We miss our best surgeon." I smiled, thinking about how different my life was from what Rachel had imagined. She'd always seen my volunteer work as running away from real life. She never understood that I'd chosen that path precisely because I could, because our father had secretly ensured we'd never want for anything. "The FBI finished their asset trace," Benjamin said, pulling up some documents on his computer. "It seems David had set up quite an elaborate network of shell companies. He was planning to use your father's house as collateral for some substantial loans." "Let me guess," I said dryly. "More investment opportunities?" Benjamin nodded. Rachel claimed she didn't know the full extent of his plans. She knew enough, I replied. The evidence had been clear: emails, phone records, bank transfers showing she was fully aware of the scheme to defraud me. Standing at the window of Benjamin's office, I looked out over the Boston skyline. Somewhere out there, Rachel was preparing for her court date, probably still believing she was somehow the victim in all this. Your father would be proud, Benjamin said quietly, not just of how you protected his legacy, but of what you're doing with it. The Scholarship Foundation had already selected its first recipients, bright, ambitious students who reminded me of our father. The quiet ones, the careful planners, the ones who understood that true success wasn't about quick profits or shortcuts. My phone buzzed again, this time an email from the real estate management company. The first round of renovations on our father's properties was complete. What had once been hidden was now being transformed into affordable housing units, community centers, and educational spaces. Do you ever regret it? Benjamin asked, exposing everything. You could have just stopped the sale quietly, kept the secret. I thought about Rachel's laugh during that late-night phone call, her casual dismissal of everything our father had built. No, I said firmly, some secrets need to be revealed. Some lessons need to be learned. Later that evening, as I packed for my return to Uganda, I found an old photo album. In it was a picture of Rachel and me as children, sitting in our father's library, surrounded by the books that had concealed his empire. We were smiling, unaware of the secrets hidden behind those shelves. I closed the album, thinking about how differently things had turned out from what either of us had expected. Rachel had thought she was seizing an opportunity, never imagining she was actually destroying her future. I had become the keeper of our father's legacy, not just protecting his wealth but transforming it into something meaningful. The next morning, as my plane took off for Uganda, I received one final text from Benjamin. Guilty plea entered. Rachel took a deal, 3 years with restitution. I turned off my phone, watching Boston disappear beneath the clouds. 3 years was nothing compared to the lifetime of trust she'd broken. But maybe, just maybe, it would be enough time for her to understand what our father had known all along. That true wealth isn't just about money, and true success isn't built on shortcuts and schemes. As for me, I had patience waiting, lives to save, and a legacy to fulfill. Rachel had tried to sell our father's house for a quick profit, never knowing she was sitting on an empire. But in the end, the house had kept its secrets until the right moment, just as our father had planned. Sometimes, I thought as the plane headed east, the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's dreams. Sometimes, it's about fulfilling your own and letting them watch from the sidelines as you build something greater than they could have imagined. The house still stands in Boston, its secrets now transformed into opportunities for others. And somewhere in Uganda, there's a hospital where a surgeon works to save lives, carrying on a different kind of legacy, one that can't be measured in dollars or deeds, but in the lives touched and the changes made. That's the thing about legacy, after all. It's not just about what you leave behind. It's about what you choose to build with what you've been given. And I chose to build something worth more than all the quick profits Rachel had ever dreamed of. That's a revenge that would have made our father proud. The meeting room fell silent as I walked in, all eyes fixed on the woman they'd once shunned. James Morgan, my former father-in-law, sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of barely concealed rage. Beside him, his son, my ex-husband David, couldn't even meet my gaze. Ms. Chen, James said stiffly, emphasizing my maiden name like it was something distasteful. Thank you for coming. I smiled, setting my laptop on the polished mahogany table. It's still Mrs. Morgan, actually. The divorce papers were never filed. The color drained from David's face. I hadn't planned to drop that bomb so early, but seeing them squirm gave me a satisfaction I couldn't resist. My name is Sarah Chen Morgan, and 2 years ago, these people had thrown me out of their lives because I chose cybersecurity over their precious family banking tradition. Now their multimillion-dollar empire was under attack, and I was their last hope. Let's focus on the matter at hand, James said sharply, sliding a folder across the table. Our systems were breached last week. The hackers are threatening to release sensitive client data unless we pay $20 million within 48 hours. I picked up the folder, though I already knew its contents. I've been monitoring the situation since it began. Not that they needed to know that. The Great Morgan & Sons Bank, I mused, flipping through the pages. brought to its knees by the very thing you dismissed as irrelevant when I warned you about it. James's jaw tightened. If you're here to gloat, I'm here because your head of it called me directly. I cut him off. He said you've tried everything else. Every security firm in the city turned you down because they know your systems are outdated. You're running infrastructure from the last decade because, and I quote, traditional banking doesn't need all that modern nonsense. David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Sarah, please, this isn't the time. When is the time, David? I asked, meeting his eyes for the first time. When you stood silent while your father threw me out? When you chose your trust fund over our marriage? Or maybe now, when everything's falling apart? 2 years earlier, this same room had witnessed a very different scene. I'd just completed my master's in cybersecurity, turning down a prestigious position at Morgan & Sons to accept a role at a leading tech firm. The betrayal, as James saw it, was unforgivable. No Morgan has ever worked outside this bank, he'd shouted, pacing the room like a caged animal. For 4 generations, we've built this legacy, and you want to throw it all away to play with computers. I tried to explain the importance of modern security measures, how the banking world was changing, but James Morgan didn't listen to women who challenged his authority, not even his daughter-in-law. Either you take your rightful place in this bank, he declared, or you're no longer welcome in this family. I looked at David then, hoping he'd finally stand up to his father. But he just stared at his shoes, shoulders slumped in familiar defeat. So I'd walked out, leaving behind their outdated ideas and suffocating traditions. I built my own consulting firm, gained a reputation as one of the best in the field. And now here they were, desperate for the very expertise they'd mocked. The hack is sophisticated, I said, returning to the present, but not impossible to trace. I can help you, but I have conditions. James leaned back, his expression wary. What conditions? I opened my laptop, typing quickly. First, you'll implement every security measure I recommend, without argument. Second, you'll create a dedicated cybersecurity division with a proper budget. And third, I paused, savoring the moment, you'll make a public announcement acknowledging the breach and my role in resolving it. Absolutely not, James exploded. We've never admitted to any security failures. The Morgan reputation is about to be destroyed anyway, I finished. In 47 hours, every account number, every transaction, every dirty little secret will be public. Your choice. The silence that followed was deafening. James's face had turned an alarming shade of red, while David looked like he might be sick. There's one more thing, I added, pulling up a series of emails on my screen. Something interesting I found while examining the hack. Would you like to see who had access to your systems the night before the breach? David's head snapped up, real fear in his eyes now. He knew exactly what I'd found. The late-night login, the disabled security protocols, the convenient gaps in the firewall, all traced back to one executive access code. His code. We should discuss this privately, he said quickly, standing up. But I was done with their secrets, their backroom deals, their carefully maintained facades. Sit down, David, I said quietly. It's time everyone knew exactly what kind of legacy your father has built. The projector hummed to life as I connected my laptop. David's access logs appeared on the screen, damning in their clarity. On Tuesday night at 11:43 p.m., I said, addressing the stunned board members, someone using executive code N7249 disabled the main firewall. 3 minutes later, they accessed the secure client database. By midnight, the backup systems were compromised. I turned to David. Would you like to explain why your code was used, or should I continue? James slammed his fist on the table. This is absurd. My son would never. Your son has been embezzling from Morgan & Sons for the past year. I cut in, switching to a new slide. Small amounts at first, carefully hidden in transaction fees. But lately he's gotten bolder. Haven't you, David? The room erupted in whispers as I displayed the evidence, transaction records, offshore accounts, falsified audits. David had been busy since I'd left, though not in ways his father would approve. You've been watching us, David said, his voice barely above a whisper. All this time. I nodded. Did you really think I'd walk away completely? I built half these systems. I know every backdoor, every vulnerability, including the ones you exploited. Why? James demanded, turning on his son. We gave you everything. David laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the room. Everything except a choice. Did you ever ask what I wanted, Dad? If I wanted to spend my life trapped in this mausoleum of tradition. I watched my ex-husband carefully. The perfect Morgan hair was crumbling before our eyes, years of resentment spilling out. The hack, one of the board members, spoke up. Was it you? David shook his head. No, I made it possible. They approached me months ago. Said they could help me disappear, start fresh. All I had to do was leave a door open. You fool, James hissed. You've destroyed everything we've built. You destroyed it, David shot back. With your rigid rules, your impossible standards. Sarah was right about modernizing, about the security risks, but you wouldn't listen. You never listen. I cleared my throat. As fascinating as this family therapy session is, we're running out of time. The hackers don't care about your drama. They want their money, or everything goes public in. I checked my watch, 46 hours. James seemed to deflate, suddenly looking every bit his 65 years. Can you stop them? Yes, I said simply. I've already identified their location and method of attack, but my conditions stand, and I'm adding one more. What now? James asked warily. David turns himself in. No cover-up, no quiet resignation. The authorities need to know exactly what happened. David stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. You can't be serious. Sarah, please, we were married. Doesn't that mean anything? I met his gaze steadily. It meant everything. That's why I waited 2 years to find the right moment. To show your father exactly what happens when he values his precious legacy over people. You planned this? James said slowly, realization dawning. You knew about David's activities all along. You waited until we were desperate. I learned from the best, I replied coldly. Isn't that what Morgans do? Use every advantage, never show weakness. You taught me well during those family dinners, James. The board members watched our exchange like a tennis match, decades of Morgan family dysfunction playing out before them. Some looked horrified, others oddly fascinated. Time's running out, I reminded them, closing my laptop. I'll be in my office when you're ready to meet my terms. All of them. I gathered my things, enjoying the heavy silence. At the door, I paused. Oh, and David. Those divorce papers you never filed? I have copies in my office. We can deal with that after you've turned yourself in. As I walked out, I heard James's voice, surprisingly quiet. What have we done? What indeed, I thought, stepping into the elevator. The Morgans had spent generations building their fortress of wealth and tradition, never realizing they were sealing themselves in a tomb. Now those walls were crumbling, and I was the only one who could prevent total collapse. The irony wasn't lost on me. The next 48 hours transformed Morgan and Sons Bank forever. David surrendered to the authorities that evening, confessing everything, the embezzlement, his role in the hack, years of financial misconduct. The press had a field day. Morgan here betrays dynasty, banking legacy crumbles. I watched it unfold from my office across town, sipping coffee and monitoring the bank's systems. James had agreed to my terms, though I suspected it nearly killed him to do so. A team of my best engineers was already upgrading their security infrastructure, dragging Morgan and Sons into the modern era whether they liked it or not. You're really not going to tell them, are you? Grace asked, perched on the edge of my desk. My best friend and business partner had been with me through everything, helping orchestrate what the media was calling the biggest banking scandal of the decade. I shook my head, pulling up the final piece of code on my screen. They don't need to know. That you were the hacker all along. That there never was a $20 million ransom, she laughed softly. Sarah, you practically performed surgery on their entire system, exposed years of corruption, and they think you're their savior. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies, I said, thinking of all those family dinners where I'd been treated like an outsider. It's about making them thank you for saving them from themselves. The truth was elegantly simple. There had been no external hackers. I'd spent 2 years monitoring the bank systems, watching David's crimes accumulate, waiting for the perfect moment. When he'd grown sloppy enough, I created a sophisticated trail of breadcrumbs leading to phantom attackers. The ransom demand was theater designed to force the Morgans' hands. My phone buzzed, James Morgan's number. Sarah, he said when I answered, his voice rough. The board meeting just ended. They voted me out. Effective immediately. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. He sighed heavily. You're probably delighted. Just like you planned. I didn't plan your downfall, James. You and David did that yourselves. I just made sure the truth came out. There was a long pause. The truth? He repeated bitterly. Do you know what the board wants now? They want you to take over as head of security, a permanent position, direct report to the new CEO. Now it was my turn to pause. This wasn't part of my plan. They're impressed with how you handled the crisis, he continued. Said it's time for new blood, modern perspectives. Everything you tried to tell us 2 years ago. I thought about the irony, the position they'd once denied me, now being offered freely. But I had built something of my own now, something that didn't require their approval or acceptance. Thank them for the offer, I said carefully, but I'll have to decline. My consulting firm keeps me quite busy. Of course it does, James replied, and I heard something new in his voice. Respect, maybe, or resignation. You never needed us, did you? Not really? No, I agreed. But you needed me, you just couldn't admit it. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a moment, thinking about legacy. The Morgans had been so focused on preserving their traditional banking dynasty that they failed to see the world changing around them. Their rigid adherence to the past had created the perfect conditions for their own undoing. A week later, I filed the divorce papers myself. David, facing multiple federal charges, signed them without argument. As I walked out of the courthouse, legally free of the Morgan name, I felt lighter somehow. The bank survived, though changed forever. New leadership, modern systems, transparent operations, everything I'd advocated for years ago. My firm handled their security transitions, commanding fees that would have made James Morgan choke. Sometimes I caught glimpses of my former father-in-law around the city, looking older and more subdued. The great Morgan legacy he'd fought so hard to protect had crumbled under its own weight, reformed into something he barely recognized. As for me, my consulting firm flourished, built on the reputation of saving Morgan and Sons from catastrophe. Other banks saw our services, desperate to avoid similar scandals. I became known as the woman who'd modernized old-world banking, though few knew the full story of how it happened. One evening, almost a year later, I received an unexpected visitor. James Morgan stood in my office doorway, grayer and thinner than I remembered. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said without preamble. About tradition, adaptation, pride. I was wrong, Sarah. About everything. I gestured for him to sit. Would you like some coffee? He shook his head. I'm selling my shares in the bank. All of them. The new board has made an offer. Smart decision, I said. Let them take it in a new direction. Like you did? He smiled faintly. I know it was you, Sarah. The hack, the ransom, all of it. Took me months to figure it out, but once I did, it was brilliant. Ruthless, but brilliant. I met his gaze steadily. Would you have preferred real hackers? Actual theft? Sometimes the best protection comes from someone who knows exactly where you're vulnerable. He nodded slowly. You found our weakness, not in the systems, but in our pride. Our refusal to change. He stood up, straightening his jacket. I just wanted you to know. I understand now. What you were trying to tell us all along. As he turned to leave, I called after him. James, thank you. For what? For teaching me that sometimes the strongest legacy isn't the one we inherit, I said. It's the one we build for ourselves. He smiled, a real smile this time. Goodbye, Sarah. Make sure they do better than we did. I watched him go, thinking about legacy, redemption, and the price of pride. The Morgans had wanted to preserve their dynasty at all costs, never realizing that true strength comes from being willing to tear everything down and build something better from the ruins. In the end, that was my real revenge, not destroying their legacy, but transforming it into something worthy of survival. Something that would last long after the old guard had faded away. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest victory of all.